The night my daughter slammed the door in my face, after inheriting $33 million, I realized money doesn't just change people, it can destroy them. I had raised her with nothing but love, packed her lunches, wiped her tears, worked 3 jobs just to give her the life I never had. I thought she would always see me as her mother, her safe place. But the moment she got her hands on that money, she looked at me as if I were disposable. "Mom," she whispered coldly, "you don't belong here anymore. This is my life now." Her words cut deeper than any knife. That night, I walked into the darkness with nothing but a trembling heart and an old suitcase. For the first time in my life, I wasn't Katherine the strong mother. I was Katherine, the unwanted. This is my story. I'm Katherine. And today, you'll hear what happened after the money that was meant to unite us tore us apart. Welcome to Katherine Stories, where every story is raw, real, and full of heart. Before we begin, tell me in the comments, which city are you watching from? It warms my heart to see where these stories travel, and it helps this video reach others who might need it. Now, let's begin. My daughter, Emily, was always the light of my life. I still remember the first time I held her, tiny, pink, fragile. I promised her then and there that I would never let this world hurt her. Every birthday cake, every scraped knee, every heartbreak she brought home from school, I was there. She was my reason to keep going, especially after my husband passed. Emily had dreams bigger than the world. She wanted to be an artist, a traveler, someone who painted her life in colors I never had the chance to see, and I wanted nothing more than to watch her shine. When my late husband passed, I thought the little home he left behind, the car, and a few savings would be all that remained of him. But hidden in his old files, investments he had quietly nurtured decades ago, bloomed into something no one saw coming, $33 million. And just like that, our world shifted. The will had named Emily the sole heir of those investments. At first, I thought nothing of it. She was our only child, and her father had always wanted her to have the best. I felt proud, almost relieved that she would never again taste the poverty and struggle I had endured. When she received the news, I was sitting right beside her at the lawyer's office. I remember how her hand trembled as the number was spoken out loud. 33 million. The kind of money people dream about, pray for, sell their souls for. Her eyes filled with tears. She turned to me, burying her face in my shoulder, whispering, "Mom, we'll never struggle again. I'll take care of you forever." Those words, they carved themselves into my heart. For a moment, I thought life had rewarded us both for all those nights of sacrifice, for all the times I'd gone to bed hungry so she could eat. But forever lasted less than a week. At first, the money seemed to bring joy. Emily insisted on taking me shopping. She bought new clothes, high heels she could barely walk in, designer purses that cost more than I had ever made in a month. I laughed when she twirled in the mirror, calling herself a new woman. I thought it was harmless fun. I thought she was just letting out years of dreams. But then, the strangers started coming. One by one, they appeared at our door. Fancy lawyers in suits that looked too sharp for our modest living room. Real estate agents with glossy brochures of mansions and penthouses. Old friends who had vanished years ago suddenly reappeared, claiming they always knew Emily would make it big. I watched them circle her like vultures. They whispered about investments, luxury cars, parties, trips to Paris. They made her laugh in ways I hadn't seen in years. And slowly, her eyes, the warm brown eyes that once lit up at my bedtime stories, turned cold, distant, calculating. The Emily who once cried over losing a cheap necklace from her grandmother now tossed away gifts as if they were trash. The first time I noticed her slipping away was small. She asked me not to come with her to dinner. "It's just business, Mom," she said. "You wouldn't understand." But the way she said it, embarrassed, dismissive, it stung. She began dressing differently. Short dresses, diamonds that sparkled so brightly they almost blinded me. Her nails, always bitten down as a child, now painted in polished perfection. Even her voice changed, softer, affected, as though she had been born into wealth instead of working-class grit. And then, she began to look at me differently too. Almost as if I were part of the life she wanted to forget. The night everything changed is seared into my memory. It was late. The living room was filled with people I barely recognized. Loud laughter, glasses clinking, perfume heavy in the air. Our modest home, the home my husband had built with his own hands, now looked like a stage for strangers. I stood in the corner, holding a tray of snacks like some servant, watching Emily parade around with her new friends. She clutched the check in her hand like it was oxygen, her entire being revolving around that slip of paper. And then, she turned to me. Her face looked conflicted, but her voice carried a firmness I'd never heard before. "Mom," she said slowly, "I think it's time you moved out. I need space. I need to live my own life." The laughter in the room quieted. Her friends whispered, smirking behind their glasses of wine. My heart dropped into my stomach. "Moved out?" I repeated, my voice barely a whisper. "Emily, this is your home. Our home. The only home you've ever known." Her eyes darted away from mine. "Mom, I've made up my mind. You'll be fine. You've always managed on your own." I stepped forward, desperate. "I'm 68 years old, Emily. This is where your father and I built our life. Every corner of this house holds our memories. How could you even say this to me?" Her hand tightened on the check. Her new friends shifted uncomfortably, but none of them intervened. "It's better this way," she muttered, almost as if convincing herself. "I need freedom. I need to figure out who I am without you watching me." My heart shattered. I had spent 68 years building a world around her, pouring every ounce of my soul into her dreams, and suddenly, I was the obstacle. I begged her to reconsider. My voice cracked, my hands trembled, but she wouldn't even meet my eyes. Then, she reached into her purse and pulled out a small envelope. She handed it to me, her fingers barely brushing mine. "There's money inside. For rent, for food. You'll manage, Mom." I opened it. A few $100s, just enough to get me out of her way. In that moment, it wasn't just rejection. It was humiliation. My daughter, the child I had carried, nursed, protected, was treating me like a stranger renting a room, like an inconvenience she could pay to disappear. The laughter in the room picked up again, covering the sound of my breaking heart. That night, I packed a small bag, a few clothes, my old glasses, a picture of her father. My hands shook as I folded each item, tears soaking the fabric. Emily didn't come to help. She didn't even look at me. She sat in the living room, her new friends around her, laughing, sipping wine, talking about houses by the sea. I stood in the doorway one last time, looking at the home I had built with love, sweat, and sacrifice. The walls that had echoed with lullabies, the kitchen that had smelled of Sunday dinners, the garden where Emily had once chased butterflies. Now, it was no longer mine. As I stepped out into the night, the cold air hit me like a slap. My old suitcase rattled against the pavement as I walked with nowhere to go. Each step felt heavier than the last. I whispered to myself, "You raised her, you gave her everything, and now she's gone." For the first time in my life, I wasn't Katherine the strong mother. I wasn't Katherine the protector. I was Katherine Faye, the unwanted, and the door behind me closed with a finality I will never forget. The days that followed were the darkest I've ever known. When Emily pushed me out of the only home I had ever known, I didn't just lose 4 walls and a roof. I lost a piece of myself. I wandered the streets with my old suitcase, the cool night air cutting through my bones. Finally, a kind neighbor, Mrs. Clark, noticed me sitting on her front steps and insisted I stay in her spare room until I could figure things out. I was grateful, but shame burned inside me. How could I explain to anyone that my own daughter had thrown me out like I was nothing? That after raising her with everything I had, she'd chosen strangers and greed over me? I couldn't, so I kept quiet. At night, I sat by Mrs. Clark's small window, my glasses slipping down my nose, staring at the faint glow of my old home across the street. From that distance, I could hear the faint hum of music, the laughter spilling out of rooms that used to hold bedtime stories and whispered prayers. People danced in my kitchen, strangers lounged on my sofa, and in the center of it all, my Emily, smiling like she'd forgotten I even existed. Each night, my chest ached with a pain so deep, I wondered if hearts could actually break apart. On the third night, I was awoken by pounding on the door. At first, I thought I dreamed it, but then the pounding came again, frantic and desperate. Mrs. Clark stirred in her bed down the hall, but I hurried to the door before she could. When I opened it, I froze. There she was, Emily, my daughter. But not the polished, glowing woman draped in diamonds I had last seen. No. This was a different Emily. Her makeup was smeared down her cheeks, her hair tangled, her designer dress wrinkled and stained. Her eyes, once filled with pride and arrogance, were swollen from hours of crying. "Mom," she gasped, her chest heaving. Please help me." Her voice cracked like glass. She reached for me with trembling hands. For a moment, I stood still. The same daughter who had slammed a door in my face just days earlier, the same daughter who told me I didn't belong, was now standing on the porch of another woman's house, begging for my arms. Part of me wanted to close the door, to let her taste the loneliness she had fed me. But then I saw her shoulders trembling, her knees threatening to give out. Instinct, the eternal instinct of a mother took over. I caught her before she fell, pulling her inside, guiding her to the couch. Her sobs shook the entire room. "Emily," I whispered, brushing the damp hair from her forehead. "What happened?" It took her minutes to catch her breath, her words spilling out in gasps. "Mom, it's gone. It's all gone. The money, the house, everything." I blinked, not understanding. "What do you mean, gone? You just had $33 million. She gripped my hand so tightly it hurt. "One of the men, the one who said he'd help me invest. He tricked me. He made me sign papers, contracts I didn't even read. I thought I was just agreeing to let him manage the accounts. But Mom, I gave him control. Full control. He transferred everything, drained it all." Her words echoed in my ears like a thunderclap. In just 3 days, she had lost what most people never even dream of. She buried her face in my lap, sobbing like a child. "Mom, I was stupid. I didn't listen. I thought they cared about me. I thought I was finally someone. And now, I have nothing. They all left me. Every single one of them. They don't answer my calls. They don't even look at me. Mom, I'm so scared." Her body shook against me. I sat frozen, torn between two storms inside me, the deep ache of betrayal that still pulsed from her rejection, and the undeniable love that swelled in me, no matter what she had done. I stared down at her, this grown woman who once clung to me after nightmares, begging me not to leave her side, and here she was again, crying into my lap, begging for comfort. But this time, the pain was different. This time, I wasn't just her mother. I was also the woman she had discarded. "Emily," I said softly, trying to steady my voice, "do you know what you did to me?" Her sobs stilled for a moment. She lifted her face, mascara streaking her pale skin. "Mom, I know I hurt you. I thought I didn't need you anymore. I thought money would make me powerful, but it just made me blind. Please forgive me." Her words cracked something inside me. Anger bubbled up. "Forgive you?" I whispered, my voice trembling. "You threw me out of my own home. You handed me a few bills and told me to survive, like I was a stranger. Do you know what it felt like, Emily? To walk out into the cold, carrying nothing but memories? Do you know what it's like to look at your child, the one you gave everything for, and realize you mean nothing to them?" Her lips quivered. "Mom, I was wrong. I was stupid. Please don't hate me." I looked away, tears filling my eyes. I wanted to hate her. I wanted to tell her this was karma, that she deserved every ounce of pain, but my heart refused, because no matter what she had done, she was still my little girl. The night dragged on as Emily poured out the whole story. She told me about the man who called himself a financial advisor, how he showered her with compliments, telling her she was brilliant, destined for greatness, how he made her feel like she belonged in that glittering world of wealth. She admitted she had ignored my warnings. He said I was too smart to need anyone, that you wouldn't understand the opportunities I had now. I believed him, Mom. I thought you were holding me back. But he was just using me. Her voice cracked, and she buried her face in her hands. He cleaned out the accounts, sold the house I just bought in my name. I signed it all away. I didn't even notice because I was too busy drinking champagne with people who didn't care if I lived or died. They all disappeared the moment the money was gone. I listened, my heart breaking, but also burning with a bitter truth. I had seen this coming. I had watched those strangers circle her like vultures, but she had refused to hear me. You thought they were your family, I said quietly. But family doesn't vanish when the money does. Family stays, even when it hurts, even when they're wrong. She clutched my hand again, tears dripping onto my skin. Please, Mom, please don't leave me. You're all I have left. For hours, she cried until exhaustion pulled her into sleep. I sat beside her, stroking her hair like I had when she was a child. My eyes never closed. I just watched her, torn between sorrow and love. In those quiet hours, I realized something. This was the turning point. Emily's millions were gone. Her pride shattered. Her so-called friends gone like smoke. All she had left was the mother she had tried to throw away, and though my heart was scarred by her betrayal, I knew I could never abandon her. Because being a mother doesn't end when your child wounds you. Sometimes, that's when it begins all over again. So when dawn broke, and she stirred awake, the first thing she saw was me, still there, still holding her hand. And in her broken, hoarse whisper, she said words I thought I'd never hear again. Mom, I need you. For a moment, anger bubbled inside me like a volcano ready to erupt. Every cruel word she had said to me, every look of disdain when she thought I wasn't good enough, every humiliating second of being cast out of my own home, flashed before my eyes. I wanted to shout. I wanted to tell her, this is what happens when you choose greed over love. This is what you deserve. But then, I looked at her. She wasn't the glamorous, diamond-draped woman who had tossed me aside. She wasn't the prideful voice that told me I didn't belong. No, sitting in front of me now was Emily, my Emily, the same little girl I once held after nightmares, the child who used to crawl into my bed whispering, Mom, don't let go. And in that moment, my heart softened. I pulled her into my arms, wrapping her trembling frame against me. She buried her face in my shoulder, sobbing so hard her entire body shook. My hand stroked her tangled hair as I whispered, Emily, money can vanish overnight, but family is all we truly have. And you almost lost that too. Her sobs grew louder, her arms clutching me tighter, like she was 5 years old again and the monsters under the bed had chased her into my arms. That night, I made her tea, the way my own mother used to make it for me when life became unbearable. I set the steaming cup in her trembling hands and sat across from her at the tiny kitchen table in Mrs. Clark's house. The dim yellow bulb above us flickered, casting soft shadows across her swollen face. Mom, she whispered, her voice raw. How do I fix this? How do I undo everything I've done? I sighed, holding her gaze. You can't undo the past, Emily, but you can learn from it. You can rise from it. My mother used to tell me, wealth without wisdom is a curse, not a blessing. And now you've seen it with your own eyes. She nodded, tears dripping into her tea. The next morning, I held her hand as we walked into the police station. Emily's steps were heavy, her eyes darting nervously, like a child entering the principal's office. The officer behind the desk listened patiently as Emily explained what had happened, how she had signed away power of attorney to a man who promised her the world, how he had transferred millions into accounts she could no longer access. I watched my daughter's face as the officer explained the truth. Most of the money was gone. "These people are professionals," he said firmly. "They know how to hide funds, move them offshore, bury them in shell companies. We'll do our best, but—" He paused, sighing. "You'll be lucky to recover even a fraction." I felt Emily's hand squeeze mine desperately, her nails digging into my skin. For the first time in her life, she was facing a storm she couldn't buy her way out of. Later, we met with a lawyer, an older man with kind eyes who spread out papers across his polished desk. Emily sat hunched in the chair, ashamed, barely able to look at him as he went over the contracts she had signed. "Ignore the fancy language," he said gently, tapping the papers. "The truth is simple. You gave him power over everything. He didn't steal it, Emily. You handed it to him." Her face crumpled at his words, and she buried her face in her hands. "I was so stupid," she whispered. I reached across the table, laying my hand over hers. "No, you were naive, and you were desperate to be seen, to be loved by people who never cared about you. That doesn't make you worthless, Emily. It makes you human." She looked up at me then, her eyes red, her lips trembling. "But Mom, I hurt you. I betrayed you. How can you even stand to look at me?" Tears pricked my own eyes. "Because you're my daughter. And love, real love, doesn't vanish when mistakes are made. It holds on, even when it hurts." The days that followed were grueling. We sat in countless offices. Banks, attorneys, investigators. Emily's pride was stripped away piece by piece. The confident young woman who once strutted in designer heels now sat small and broken, apologizing for signatures she hadn't read, for trusting the wrong people, for letting greed drown her judgment. Each time I was there beside her, not because I had to be, but because I chose to be. Some nights she would collapse into tears again. "Mom, I wish I could go back. I wish I could erase it all, the money, the parties, the so-called friends. It wasn't worth losing you." I would hold her hand and remind her, "We can't go back, Emily, but we can move forward. And forward is where healing lives." Weeks passed. Slowly, painfully, through legal battles and long hours of paperwork, Emily recovered small portions of the stolen fortune. Not millions, not even close, but enough to start again. But something else was happening. 2. Something far more valuable than numbers in a bank account. Our relationship, once shattered, was stitching itself back together thread by fragile thread. One evening, after another long day of meetings, Emily and I walked home together. The air was cool, the street quiet except for the crunch of our footsteps. She slipped her arm through mine, leaning gently against me. "Mom," she said softly, "do you remember when I was little and we used to count stars in the backyard? You told me that no matter how dark the night gets, there are always lights if you look up." I smiled faintly, my throat tightening. "Of course I remember. You always counted faster than me." She chuckled through her tears. "I think I forgot that lesson, Mom. I thought money was the light, but it was just a shadow. You're the real light. You always have been." Her words melted the last shard of bitterness in my heart. I squeezed her arm. "Emily, you don't need millions to be rich. You just need love, and you'll always have mine." Slowly, life found a new rhythm. Emily sold the expensive clothes she had once flaunted, using the money to pay legal fees. She returned to her art, sketching quietly in the evenings, rediscovering a passion she had long abandoned for luxury. Sometimes I would catch her staring at me with tear-filled eyes, as if afraid I might vanish. "I don't deserve you," she'd whisper. And I'd reply, "You don't have to deserve love, Emily. You just have to accept it." Looking back now, I realized something. The millions were never the blessing. They were the curse. The blessing was hidden in the wreckage, the chance for Emily to see the truth, for her to come back to me, for us to find each other again. And as I watched her sit at the table one night, sketching a picture of us together, I knew that no fortune in the world could ever compare to that, because money may vanish, but love endures. Emily never got all her millions back, but in losing almost everything, she found something far greater. She found humility, she found gratitude, and most importantly, she found me again. The weeks that followed were quiet, almost painfully so. Emily stayed with me in my little house, the same house she once thought too small, too plain for her new life. Now she walked through the narrow hallways as though every corner carried a memory she had once tossed aside. One evening, as the kettle hissed and filled the room with steam, she sat across from me at the kitchen table. That table had seen so much. Birthday cakes with melting candles, late-night homework sessions, tears after her first heartbreak. Now it held two women, a mother and daughter, trying to stitch together the broken pieces of their bond. Her eyes glistened with unshed tears. "Mom," she whispered, "I thought money would make me powerful, but it only showed me how weak I really was, without you." I reached across, my hands weathered by years of work and sacrifice, and held hers in mine. "Emily," I said softly, "you don't need 33 million to be rich. You need love, you need wisdom, and you'll always have mine." For the first time in what felt like an eternity, she smiled, not the forced smile she had worn in the presence of her so-called friends, but the genuine smile of the little girl who once danced barefoot in the garden, laughing under the summer rain. That day, we began to rebuild what was nearly lost forever, not with wealth, not with mansions or cars, but with forgiveness, second chances, and the unshakable bond between a mother and her child. But rebuilding wasn't easy. Forgiveness is never instant. It's a choice we make every day. And there were mornings I'd wake up with the bitter taste of her words still echoing in my ears. "Mom, I think it's time you moved out." Ian, Emery cut deep, like glass lodged in the heart. Yet every time those dark feelings rose, I reminded myself of the trembling girl who came to my door in the middle of the night begging not for money, but for love. That was the girl I had raised. That was the daughter I knew. Emily struggled too. Sometimes she'd flinch when she looked at the pile of bills on my table, the modest groceries, the worn furniture. She would whisper, "I ruined everything, didn't I?" And I'd shake my head, gently cupping her cheek. "No, sweetheart, you just lost your way. The best of us do. What matters is that you found your way back." One Sunday, we went to the old church on the corner. Emily hadn't been there in years. As we walked inside, people turned their heads, some in surprise, some in judgment. They had heard the stories. Small towns never forget. But instead of hiding, Emily stood tall. After the service, she leaned toward me and said, "Mom, I want to do something different with my life. Something meaningful. I don't want to chase money anymore. I want to give." It was the first time in months I saw a spark of purpose in her eyes, so together we began small. Emily started volunteering at a local shelter, serving meals, folding clothes, listening to people whose struggles made her own seem trivial. And every evening she'd return home with stories, not about luxury or wealth, but about resilience, about gratitude from people who had nothing. One night, she sat beside me and said, "Mom, they thanked me just for listening. Do you know how powerful that felt? I never felt that kind of power when I was signing $1,000,000 checks." I smiled, because I knew then she was finally beginning to understand. Months passed. We grew closer than ever, though scars remained. Sometimes when Emily saw headlines about people flaunting their wealth online, a shadow crossed her face. "That was almost me," she'd admit. "Empty smiles, fake friendships, and a heart full of nothing." And I would remind her, "But it isn't you anymore. You survived it. You learned." There's a saying my own mother used to tell me, "Gold tested by fire is pure." And Emily, my Emily, was being purified by her losses. shaped into someone stronger, wiser, and far more compassionate than before. One afternoon, as the sun dipped low and painted the sky in hues of gold and crimson, Emily brought out an old photo album. We flipped through pages filled with memories. Her first day at school, family picnics, her father holding her high in the air as she laughed. Tears blurred her vision. "Mom, I forgot all of this. I thought I was too good for where I came from. I thought I was better than you, but I was so wrong." I held her hand tightly. "We all make mistakes, Emily. Some cost us money, some cost us people. But as long as you're breathing, you can make things right." Over time, Emily began piecing together a modest living again, not through shortcuts or smooth-talking strangers, but by working honestly. She found a small job at a community center, organizing events, helping children with after-school programs. The paycheck was humble, but the pride it gave her was immeasurable. "Mom," she told me one evening, setting her bag down on the counter, "I earned this, not because of Dad's investments, not because someone handed it to me, but because I showed up, and I can't explain how good that feels." I hugged her, whispering, "That's the kind of wealth no one can ever steal." And though the world might look at her and say she lost everything, I knew the truth. Emily had gained everything that truly mattered. Red. She gained perspective, she gained strength, and she gained back the bond with her mother that $33 million nearly destroyed. Sometimes, at night, I catch her humming softly in the kitchen, cooking a simple meal for us both. And I think to myself, this is richness, this is abundance, not the kind that sits in bank accounts, but the kind that fills a home with warmth, laughter, and peace. One last memory stays with me. We were sitting on the porch as the stars came out, sipping tea. Emily turned to me and asked, "Mom, do you forgive me? Truly?" I looked at her, at the woman she had become, bruised by mistakes but glowing with newfound wisdom, and I smiled. "Emily," I said, "I forgave you the moment you knocked on my door, because that's what mothers do. We love, even when it hurts." She laid her head on my shoulder, and for the first time in a long time, I felt whole. I'm Katherine, and if this story touched your heart, share it with someone who needs a reminder. No amount of money can replace a mother's love, because money fades, mansions crumble, cars rust, but love endures. And sometimes, losing everything is the only way to discover what truly matters.